Hey babes, and welcome or welcome back. If you're brand new here, there is a few things to know. I am an indie author. My name is Nadia. This page you're looking at right now, that is chapter 8 of my second book. So if you are brand spanking new, you're more than welcome to listen from chapter 8, but you might not understand everything. I would highly advise going and starting from at least the prologue of the Irregulars, which is what we're looking at. Um, Probably want to start from the Rebels. I'll put the links to both playlists down below so you can go find them and make your choice yourself. The other thing to know is that I created this channel specifically for a friend of mine who needs to read with audiobooks. Since I cannot currently afford to do an audiobook the way I want to do it, which is with human readers and or narrators and very professionally done, I'm doing it the most ghetto way I can because I can get it out there. And I don't edit for one simple reason. My friend thinks it's hilarious when I make mistakes, so I leave them in there for her personal enjoyment. I apologize in advance, but there is no accounting for taste. Jay, this is your fault. I'm just gonna say that now. So, without further ado, and I'm sorry if there's a weird echo in here. I'm in a hotel room in Cincinnati, Ohio. If you know me, you know I live in Oregon, so I'm a long way from home. But I missed putting in for last Wednesday, so I'm getting it now because I can. So, without further ado, let's get into The Irregulars, Book 2 of the Northwest Uprising. We are on Chapter 8. Man 1. I told you my man would win the election. Man 2. So what? I've still had to scramble to keep my business going. Even producing those ridiculous M's isn't enough to replace the revenue I've lost from firearms. Transcript of phone call, January 6th, 2053. Um, I published this for the first time before January 6th, whenever the fuck it was. Oops, oh well. I spun, looking desperately for a way out. How had we gotten to this point? It all seemed routine. Well, as routine as we'd had on this trip. We'd spotted the same truck rolling down a small lane through hazelnut orchards in and out 2 days in a row. So we went looking for their destination. Like so many others, it was full of women. Their ages ranged from mid-teens to mid-20s. They were clean, eyes dull, uncaring of what went on around them, completely disinterested in the world until we broke down their door. Outside, we'd left their guards lying where they fell. Steve could do whatever the hell they wanted with the bodies. So many people kept in such depression leaves a mark, even in a house as spacious as this one. But that's not what made Phoenix's eyes burn with a feral light. The two-story house could have fit my home inside it twice over with room to spare, but that's not what made me snarl. Every window was barred, but that's not what made Archangel curse with a creativity that would have made a sailor proud. All the doors were solid wood with strong locks, but that's not what made Eleanor breathe the Lord's name in a prayer of deliverance. No, it was that every woman in the place was heavily pregnant. So, in the finest brand new traditions of the Irregulars, we packed them up into a transport we'd found hidden in the barn and burned the place to the ground. Maybe burning it wasn't our best idea, but it led us to where I currently sat, trapped, with no way out. I took in our location, calculating options. Steve had us pinned on the banks of a wide, deep river, unable to cross without exposing ourselves. The thick underbrush and a few downed trees provided some cover, enough to keep us from dying wholesale, but we were still fucked, our backs to a river that... I grinned. What? What? Phoenix edged closer. I recognize that look. We're about to do something really stupid or really smart, depending on how it ends. Those nearest us perked up at her words, and a lot of people glanced at me as if I were about to sprout wings. Okay, I need two groups. Soldiers, stay here. I need you to start building. I grabbed a piece of driftwood and hurled it onto a downed tree. You guys like digging, right? What do you have in mind? Archangel turned away from the forest. Lines of exhaustion showed at the corners of his eyes, a scratch on his cheek his only color, but he gripped his handgun, ready to march straight into Steve's lines if I asked him. Build a barricade. Your choice on how it comes together. You guys are going to be bait, so whatever keeps you breathing. Some of the men, needing no more than that, got to work. Tiny folding shovels were produced, and they got to work moving dirt, rocks, and wood around. Why bother? A big soldier called Bruiser spoke up. All we have to do is get rid of a little extra weight. He shot a significant glance at the rescued women. They'll lose interest in us. Shut the fuck up, Bruiser, Archangel snarled. We already know you're a moron. You don't have to prove it. What about us? Phoenix watched me, her eyes sparkling. We're going hunting. What? No. Griffin edged over, keeping the bulk of his attention on the trees. You should be sending the soldiers. They're trained for this. Not like we are. I dropped my pack, stripping to the bare minimum. Pants, long-sleeve t-shirt, and moccasins, and began putting my weapons back on, strapping everything down snugly. The other women and young Thorin followed suit. Archangel grabbed the big man's arm. She's right. In 5 minutes, it'll be more dangerous here. We draw their fire, keep their attention on us. How safe they are depends on how well we do our job. Besides, he glanced at the pregnant women huddled by the water's edge. They need us. Hey! Sparrow opened her pack, pulling out little packages and fixing a small mess of wires to each one. I'm staying here. These, she hefted the little bomb, will be more useful to these guys. And I don't know if they can get wet, she added under her breath. I like the way you think. I finished the last of my checks. Everybody else? 15 women and 1 young man watched me expectantly. Water looks deep, don't it? Ah, fuck you, Captain! Phoenix scrunched her nose. I hate cold water! I flicked her butt. Me too. Should be fun, eh? Listen up, guys. This is loosely what I hope happens. The water carried me quickly, dragging me along the river bottom. I snatched at rocks as I flew past, pulling myself lower. I had no idea how deep the river was, and the thought of my butt surfacing and getting shot was great incentive to stay down. My lungs grew tighter, begging me to surface, aching for a breath. Occasionally, a hand grasped my ankle, or another body brushed mine as we crawled the river. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore, my lungs screaming for air. I'd rather be shot than drown. Pushing off the riverbed, I shot for the surface, grabbing what I could of other people as I passed. I'd prefer staying close together, but however it happened. Surfacing, I gasped, sucking in lungfuls of sweet, sweet air. No bullets peppered the water, and the sound of gunfire was loud, but muffled, the trees blocking some of the noise and the occasional deeper boom. More heads broke the surface, and I counted each one as we crawled onto the shore and into the trees. 13, 14, 15... I looked around anxiously. Where's Feisty? Shaking heads and muttering met my question. Stepping carefully over the river rocks, I hustled down to the water's edge. I spotted the girl's hair downstream, sleek and shining in the watery sunlight. Waving, I contemplated jumping to get her attention, but she spotted me before I made an idiot of myself and waved back just before disappearing around the bend. She good? Phoenix asked, her breath puffing white in the chill air. The fighters shivered while they readied weapons, and I struggled to make numbed fingers work to loosen the straps on mine. Apparently, she can hold her breath longer than the rest of us. I stripped off my shoulder harness to pull my shirt off and wring it out. It wasn't warm, but it had stopped dripping. Phoenix laughed quietly. You could go into a fight like that. She nodded at my leather bra, the lacings on the front revealing the only hint of cleavage I'd ever had in my life. Steve would be so distracted they wouldn't put up a fight. Super comfy, aren't they? I gave her a meaningful glance. I just wonder how close it is to the real deal. It was a dick move, but I couldn't resist reminding her about our discussion about the bras and a certain actor. She flushed, a deep fire engine red. I grinned, about to put my foot in my mouth, but her fingers were flexed into claws. Perhaps this one time, discretion was the better part of valor. We really didn't need her murdering me right now. We're ready to go, Captain. Evenstar, Thorin's mother, pulled me from my fun, her lips tightly compressed. Any time. Her husband had died in a failed ambush earlier this year. Or last year. We'd taken her off rotation since the Ridge, but she'd insisted on helping with this campaign. Kestrel had given her the okay to return to the field. So far she'd performed all right, but her sharp edges only grew sharper. I soon found myself shirted once more and creeping through the brush, stepping high over a fallen branch. To my left, Phoenix was little more than a shadow. Evenstar was the next fighter to my right. Movement 24 yards ahead. I crouched lower, moving cautiously. Making use of every bit of cover, I worked my way closer, scooping up a hefty rock along the way. Despite his role as lookout, Steve clearly had his attention on the fight behind him. A breeze kicked up, hiding any telltale movements in the foliage around me and cutting right through my wet clothes. I shivered again and bit my lip, focusing. Rising from behind a tree, I raised the rock and stepped out while his back was turned. Some whisper must have given me away, because he turned and started at the sight of me, his rifle held low. We stared at each other for a long moment, me with my rock high, he with his rifle halfway to his shoulder. "Awkward," I said. The soldier gaped, gasped, and crumpled to reveal Evenstar with a bloody knife in her hand. "What?" she snapped. "Were you planning to stare at each other all day?" I held my hands out helplessly, still gripping the rock. When she frowned at it, I dropped it and tried to kick it behind, but she'd already turned back to the fight. What followed was bloody work. The bulk of the small army concentrated on our soldiers and the pregnant women. In our area, at Steve's rear, small fights broke out. The fighters teamed up in groups of 2 or 3 to take down a man, then moving on to find their next target, finding the battle partners they preferred. The fighting was all hand-to-hand in an attempt to stay quiet and get us closer before the majority of Steve noticed. I hunted for fresh targets, short swords in hand, moving quickly through the woods. Wet hair, the same color as an otter's pelt, caught my eye about 30 feet away. Feisty tangled with Steve, darting in and out, knife low, then high, but the man held her off. His partner lunged at Ink, who stayed at her friend's side. While the girls kept Steve busy, I sheathed the swords and drew a gun, checking the mag. Fully loaded, as it should be. Firing pin looked clear and in good order. I nodded. Feisty danced around the soldier, slashing and spinning, but she couldn't keep that up long. Another pair of soldiers, spotting the fighters, headed over. I nodded again. Couldn't keep quiet forever, and return fire from the riverbank was slowing, so it was time to switch it up. "Feisty, down!" I bellowed. The teenager dropped immediately. The moment she moved, I fired. He'd barely hit the ground when Feisty slipped behind Ink's opponent, neatly slitting his throat. I lined up on the 2 who were now running at the fighters and dropped them. Only 3 missed. Not bad me. "That took way too long!" Phoenix shouted as she ran past, tackling a soldier hiding behind a bush. Trust Phoenix to count my shots in the middle of a fight. "Fuck shit up, kids!" I waved to Ink and Feisty. Time for the bigger guns. More and more irregulars switched to firearms, Steve's rear finally becoming aware of our presence. Things turned into a regular firefight, although we were spread out enough that Steve didn't have anywhere near as many targets as we did. "Oh, I hope you guys are ready," I muttered, wishing I could talk to our soldiers. Once we had Steve's full attention and they began turning away from the beleaguered group trapped on the riverbank, I waved to Phoenix. She let out a piercing whistle, and we slowly retreated towards the river, allowing Steve to push us back. Storm dashed past me, turning on a dime to take cover behind a tree, her gun up and firing steadily. "Go!" she barked. I ran a dozen paces past her, finding myself a secure spot. "Go!" I yelled. The words echoed up and down our line. Steve formed a ragged line, an implacable march towards us. They were close enough I could see mouths twisted, but not so close I could make out the whites of their eyes. Enough distance, then. Sarge had drilled us on this very maneuver until we could do it in our sleep, covering each other so that no one was too exposed. I didn't like firing so rarely, but we had to make Steve think we were on the run. "Come on, guys," I whispered, firing carefully. "Where's my signal?" "The river's just there," Phoenix shouted as she passed me. 10 yards! "Get to it and wait for the signal." I zeroed in on a flash of movement, waiting until I saw it before firing again. Phoenix waved her arms. "The river!" she screamed, leading the way to find a spot to use as cover. I waited for Phoenix to call the last line back before moving. Turning, I spotted someone who wasn't retreating. Evenstar. "Hey!" I ran over. "Didn't you hear? Fall back!" Evenstar took a firmer grip on her handgun, leaning her left shoulder harder into the tree. "You go! Someone should stay and provide cover." "That's what the fucking signal is for!" I put my back to hers, peering around the other side of the tree. "Get moving!" "No!" she shouted. "They took Daniel from me!" Her voice shook. Ah, fuck. It was what I'd been afraid of. Fuck, 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 fuck. "What about Thorin?" I wished I knew the boy's real name. That might have gotten her attention. "He's grown into a good man. He has friends in all of you. Daniel only has me." Her shoulders trembled, then squared resolutely. "Fine." I slumped, then sided at Steve. "I'm staying with you then." She jabbed me with her elbow. "Don't be stupid. They need you." "Mom!" Thorin screamed from the river, crawling over the downed tree they hid behind. "What are you doing?" "I'm avenging your father!" she shouted back, never moving from her position. "Someone needs to. Mom, please, please come with me," he begged. "Your father needs me right now." Her voice shook and she shifted at my back. I stepped forward slightly, firing rapidly, switching to a fresh gun as soon as I emptied one. Only one left. Boy better hurry up and convince her. Footsteps could barely be heard over the gunfire, and the next time he spoke, he was mere feet away. "Mom, this isn't the time! If you come away now, you can get more than if you stayed here." Steve surged forward a dozen feet, bullets flying thickly. I fired as much as I could, more concerned with not dying this instant than the conversation now taking place somewhere around my knees. Suddenly, a hand tapped my thigh. "Captain!" Thorin said urgently. "Let's go!" I backed after them, swapping mags as I went. "Oh, how nice! We've all come to a logical decision. I didn't really feel like dying today anyway." Noticing that we'd barely returned fire after their last push, Steve went into an all-out charge. Sudden gunfire erupted behind me, cutting down the first row. I sprinted towards the river, right on mother and son's heels. "Where's my damn signal?" I bellowed to the sky. The signal began as it trembled through the earth, the force of the explosion growing until I staggered, lost my balance, and face-planted. Hot wind gusted, blasting the light underbrush and taking all the sound with it. Time passed. I lifted my head, blinking rapidly, swiping frantically at my eyes to clear the dust. I tapped my ears, cleaning them out with a finger, but blood rushing was all I could hear. Hopefully it'd be temporary. Rolling over, I knocked into Evenstar, lying stunned next to me. Shaking her, I shouted, I hope, "Wake up!" My words came as if from underwater, murky, the consonants blurring. She stirred slightly. "Good enough." Dragging her up, I shoved her towards the water. She staggered a couple steps and bent suddenly. I paused, afraid she was about to puke, but she just pulled ink to her feet, the two of them steadier together. Thorin, moving under his own steam, followed them, grabbing others as he went. The river stretched in front of me, wide, deep, and absolutely beautiful. If we could cross before Steve got their shit together. I counted heads as the fighters waded into the water, and only once everyone entered did I follow. Panting, I squealed when the water touched my belly. Lunging forward, I swam towards the middle. The far bank was too steep to climb, but we might be able to find a low spot downstream. A second explosion poured more smoke and flames into the sky, the columns rising into the clouds. I breathed out in relief. My ears still worked. How often can a person be deafened before it becomes permanent, I wondered. "Downstream!" I shouted, turning to watch the bank for any sign of movement. "Let's not wait for Steve to wake up." A splash and a merry laugh brought a grin to my face. "Can I offer an alternative?" Dereva shouted. "We've already collected the others." Twisting, I saw Dereva standing atop the bank, her hands on her hips in a full-on Wonder Woman pose. The watery sunlight shone on the blonde streak running through her brown hair. I thought she'd never looked more beautiful. A rope trailed through the water, the other end disappearing behind her. "You beauty!" I shouted, treading water. "Marry me!" "How'd you manage to find us?" Phoenix asked. A good question, since the last we'd seen of her, we'd been 30 miles and a bunch of hills and trees away from here. "Easily," she grinned while the fighters hauled themselves out of the water. "I just followed the sounds of violence." Dereva left 2 days later with all the vehicles again, taking the pregnant women, the dead, and the badly injured back to the lair. We had no plans on when to meet up again. She would simply do the best she could. "There's a lot less Steve in the mountains, but you're not done yet," she said regretfully right before they left. Ever since she'd gone, the rain had been constant, a classic Oregon winter. Wet. Everything was wet, all the way down to my underwear, and I hated it when that got soaked. I could stand a lot if I had dry underwear. The only not so bad thing was that I didn't have to deal with a period. It completely passed me by. Pretty sure Doc wouldn't like that fact, but there you have it. Can't please everybody. "Can we do something big?" Phoenix asked. "What do you mean?" "Big. You know, something that'll really draw Steve out and make him stay down here." Griffin, heading past with freshly filled canteens, paused. "I'm sorry? Big fucking explosions weren't quite enough. What would you consider being properly big?" She shrugged. "Hit a town?" I wrinkled my nose. "We just stole a bunch of pregnant women. And I'm tired. Let's give them a chance to have that news get out. In the meantime, maybe a convoy will do? Otherwise, how much food we got without hunting?" Griffin shook his head. "Perhaps a week. It's not good." 2 weeks later, I knelt in front of a tiny campfire, feeding it twigs and leaves until it was large enough to catch on sticks. I chewed a new mint leaf, ignoring my growling stomach. People were listlessly lying on the ground, huddling together for warmth, asleep if they were lucky. They still doubled up, two to a blanket. We never seemed to have enough. Dereva had all our spares in the tailgate's box. Not like we knew we'd need them. "Eleanor?" I shifted, preparing to stand. My legs couldn't do it, and I dropped abruptly onto my butt. "Shit! Get—" I found myself looking into the liquid brown eyes of a toddler clutching a ragged teddy bear. She was part of a group we'd rescued 5 days ago. She stared at my lips intently, her mouth working. Ouch?" "Captain?" Eleanor made her way through our cramped camp, stepping over sleeping adults. "Oh, there you are, honey." Cooing, she scooped up the baby, kissing her rosy cheeks, making the baby smile and gurgle. "What did you need, Captain?" I shook my head, trying to clear the cobwebs. "What? Oh, right. Food. How are people doing?" "Despite our best efforts, they're about to starve," Eleanor said gently. "We can't keep running. We need food or a pickup." We'd found 10 more people, 3 adults and the rest barely more than kids 5 days ago. Half starved, they'd devoured what food we had, and the wildlife wasn't exactly teeming right now. A couple rabbits didn't go too far when you had nearly 30 people. For the last week, we'd been on strict rations, and that, combined with our grueling pace, was taking its toll on everyone, including the fighters. I sighed, re-examining our position. We'd set up in a fallow field right next to a creek, hiding in the trees. The nearest road was over a quarter-mile away. It wasn't great, especially if the creek rose any more from the rain, but it could work. "We'll stay here a few days then. Tomorrow, those of us who can hunt will go out and see what we can bring back." It'd been 3 days since we'd seen Steve, when they were closing in on an old shed they thought we were in. Sparrow, using some fertilizer and a few things I'd previously thought useless under the circumstances, left them a surprise. I hoped it'd keep them busy for a while. At the very least, they'd be injured, which should buy us time and space. And through everything, Archangel was everywhere. Mostly, he had my back. Sometimes literally. I'd almost gotten used to turning and finding him behind me, scanning our surrounds to ensure we were safe. Right now, he scrounged for inner bark for people to eat. It wasn't much, but it worked. The next morning, half the fighters headed out in different directions. I walked with Archangel until our trails split. One went north towards small towns and scattered farms, the other east, back towards the mountains. You take the mountains, I said, my lips quirking wryly. I shouldn't be left to go hunting on my own. He cocked his head, blue eyes bright with curiosity. Why not? Eleanor said so. I stuck out my lower lip. Eleanor said so only because of the mountain lion attack, but that was hardly my fault. She still said no. But I'm really good at ransacking houses, so I'll take that one. He held out his right hand. I reached out, only for him to clasp my forearm. I gripped his in return, his skin so hot, strong muscles under my fingers. I forced my fingers to keep still when all they wanted was to stroke and explore. He stood close, his eyes mere inches away. I'd had no idea all the benefits of crushing on a man barely taller than me. Stay safe, he said quietly. I took a shuddering breath, releasing his arm reluctantly. See you back at camp. Good hunting. Without further ado, we parted, each taking our path. In town, every house I passed I ransacked, even going around in the yard, hoping for the remains of a garden. Cutting across a field, a farmhouse slowly being consumed by wisterian weeds lurked. It'd been run down before, and now was little more than a pile of junk topped with corrugated iron, surrounded by piles of what could, with decent imagination, be called outbuildings. The ground swayed and I knelt abruptly, my stomach cramping, drinking water and breathing until the pain passed. I wobbled as I stood, my rifle knocking against low-hanging branches, too hungry to care about the noise. I'd never be able to outrun Steve in this condition, so either they were here and I was dead, or they weren't. Either way, no point worrying about it. I spent more time than I should have searching those excuses for buildings, but I'd hoped, as remote as it was, that Steve missed something. I came up empty. Steve picked everything clean. No edible plants, no old garden, nothing. I cursed, tears coming to my eyes. Going back without finding something was intolerable, but I wouldn't be able to keep going much longer either. Some of the people at camp were starving, not just extremely hungry. If they didn't get something soon, they were toast. My shoulders slumped. I turned back to the forest to see a dog sitting just outside the trees, patiently waiting to be noticed. She was a mutt, too many breeds to guess at, her ribs showing plainly above hanging teats. The old girl had short brownish-black fur with a bit of gray around her muzzle. When I saw her, her ears pricked up, tail thumping the ground. I knelt and held a hand low to the ground, talking softly. The poor thing, starved of human companionship, didn't need much encouragement, nosing around my hand before lunging at me, nearly knocking me to the ground. I laughed quietly, rubbing her ears and scratching her neck and back. She quivered with excitement, little whimpers escaping her throat. Poor baby, I murmured. How long have you been alone, huh? She thrust her nose up under my chin, her tail wagging so hard her entire back half waggled with it. Eventually I rose, stretching my legs and giving her a few good pats to her side. Sorry, darling, but I gotta go. I smiled down at her, unsure whether she'd even follow me as I left. I've got starving people to feed. I stopped, a grimace of pain and realization twisting my face. This friendly dog, so sweet and lonely, could be my answer. I sat down heavily, setting the rifle next to me, and the dog got as much of herself as would fit into my lap, licking my face. No, no, I whispered thickly, tears choking me. Don't be happy I'm staying. Don't. Reaching behind me, I pulled out the knife I kept sheathed at the small of my back. Stroking her head, I brought it around. Forgive me, I whispered, setting the blade against her throat. I grit my teeth, preparing myself. The east glowed rose and gold, the sun not even cresting the mountains before I made it back to camp, an old weighted feed sack slung over my shoulder. Some heads popped up, looking hopefully at the sack, the rescued not having the energy to do more. Got anything? Phoenix, sitting on a log, watched 3 cooking pots. Yes, I set the sack down carefully and plopped on the log next to her. You have no idea how hard it was. No shit, Sherlock. I found a bunch of stinging nettle, some dandelion, and 3 rabbits. We'll have stew shortly, but it's nowhere near enough." "Who else is back?" She ran through a list while I rubbed my bad shoulder. Everyone came back with something, though in many cases it was still thin. There were only 2 still out, Archangel and Storm. I hope they were okay. The best to come back so far was Griffin with a small old sheep. "Griffin is chopping it up to roast, though these guys," she nodded to the rescued, "would probably eat it raw. What did you get?" I reached into the sack between my feet. "First off, hold this." I set a wriggling puppy in her hands. She squealed, cradling the pup, kissing its soft fur. I pulled out 2 more warm, wiggly bundles and passed them to Feisty and Gramps, who'd wandered over to see what had Phoenix so excited. "What about food?" a rescued woman asked. "Got that too," I said, pulling out a layer of grass and leaves. Didn't want the puppy sitting right on it. It just wouldn't be right. I grinned, pulling out a chicken, its head hanging limply. Phoenix laughed, the first one to see what came out of my magic bag. Exclamations surrounded me while Phoenix passed her puppy to Ink and grabbed the first chicken, taking it to the field to gut it. I took out 3 more chickens, and in the bottom were a dozen eggs. "How did you find all this?" Phoenix asked from the edge of the field. "I had help." I pointed to the bushes upstream. The dog, her gray muzzle barely standing out against the shadows, stood trembling, yearning for companionship and her pups, but terrified to be so close to so many strangers. "This old girl's been following the chickens, eating some eggs, it seems. She also had to move her pups, though, so we owe her a leg and a home." One of the rescued, an older woman, protested at that. "You can't be serious! We're starving and you want to feed a dog?" I looked to the heavens for patience and sighed heavily. "Keep this up and she's gonna get a whole chicken. I don't know how to say this any clearer, but we wouldn't have any of this if it wasn't for her." In the excitement of more food, Archangel arrived back in camp. "Hey," he grinned at me, holding up his pack. "I found stuff." I smiled at him, my heart lighter already. Phoenix, back at the stoves with a plucked and gutted chicken, nodded to the ground next to her. "What you got?" He turned his bag over, emptying out 2 dozen potatoes and a whole bunch of cans. In the very bottom, wrapped in leaves, lay 2 rabbits. I caught a glimpse of cherry pie filling. Without being asked, Gramps came back with an armload of dry wood. "We're gonna need this between chickens and a sheep." "Who got the sheep?" Archangel asked. "Griffin," I said. "And weren't you going hunting? What do you call all this?" He laughed softly. "This pie filling was sneaky. I had to sit still for over an hour before it came within reach." I snickered. A cold nose thrust against the back of my neck, and I started. Twisting, I found the dog behind me, drawn into camp. I scratched her, rubbing her ears. "Who's my good girl?" I murmured. "You are. Yes, you are my good girl. You're the bestest good girl in the world." A pup whined, and the old girl immediately left me to take care of her babies. Phoenix watched her go. "You didn't think of, you know." She drew her finger across her throat. I hunched my shoulders. "I did. Nearly did. But in the end, couldn't. So I let her go." "And she led you to this?" Archangel waved, encompassing the chickens and eggs. He nodded. I nodded. He shook his head. "You guys are the best good girls in the world." All right. That is chapter 8. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please do come back next week. I will probably be traveling on Wednesday, so next week's chapter will be a little bit late, but I'll still aim to get it up sometime next week. Might be Sunday. And if you enjoyed this, please like, subscribe, share it. I'm really just trying to get the word out about these books because I think they're freaking awesome. A lot of other people agree with me, but, you know, we're a few small voices in a sea of books and readers. So any little thing you can do will help because it'll tell the algorithm that you enjoyed this video, you enjoyed this story, and the algo will go and share it with more people from there. In the meantime, I'll see you next week.